Hey, Off-Season After Dark fans, glad to have you back here. We have another ACC episode this week. We're glad to welcome Jesse from Plant the Spear to talk Florida State football today. So, should be a good episode. We are, hopefully we'll continue through our other P4 schools and get through most of those before next fall starts. We got a long ways to go, but Jesse, glad to have you here. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what got you, covering Florida State, how long you've been in the space, and where they can find you. And awesome. For everybody out there, I'll tag, all of his accounts as usual, so it'll be an easy follow for you guys.
Yeah, first off, Mike, I appreciate you having me on. I always love coming on talking about college football and Florida State, even if it's not been the easiest conversation to have over the past couple of years, but definitely appreciate you having me on. So, yeah, man, I've been a lifelong Florida State fan, grew up kind of around the school. My brother went to Mike Martin baseball camp. If you know anything about college baseball, that name should ring a bell. So just growing up around the campus in Tallahassee, I was too young to go to the camp. So, my dad would take me over to Doak Campbell Stadium in the Bobby Bowden era, got to go to a couple games and, just hooked as a 10-year-old kid or however old around that age, seeing Osceola and Renegade, man, it was just a natural fit. It was, and I've been hooked for life. And so then, I moved up to the Carolinas in 2014, and we were going through the Jimbo run, and everything was fun to talk about and everything. And you just kind of moved away from your football buddies, And so I finally started Plant the Spear as kind of an outlet to connect with other Florida State fans, being that I had moved away from my home base, and I started that in 2020, late 2021, going into 2022. And it's just been a really fun ride ever since, man. Of course, it's been a roller coaster to say the least.
It sure has. Yeah.
But it's been a fun ride. And so, we're on YouTube, social media. We got plantthespear.com, our website with written articles and all that stuff. We have a couple of really big features and announcements that are coming up in the next month of things that we're going to be expanding as an outlet as far as new features for our listeners and everything. So if you're a Florida State fan and you're looking for a new and growing community, check us out, Plant the Spear, man, and ready to talk about some Noles.
That's awesome. And I feel like, our, kind of my brother group is mostly SEC, but, my niche in here is branching out to the other conferences and teams. So people watching here, if they're following me, they're going to be interested in other schools. So I think, hopefully that'll help you out a little bit and help all of us out.
Well, hey, you never know, man. In the next couple of years, we might be in that tree. We might be in that SEC tree or the Big Ten tree. You never know.
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe the Big 12, but who knows about that?
Yeah, hope not.
Yeah. Who knows where any of us will be conference-wise.
I know.
Yeah. I will say one thing, being a Gamecock guy, changing conferences is not really something I'm worried about, because you kind of feel like in the SEC and Big Ten, you're the one absorbing others. It's not that you're going to be going somewhere else.
If you're in the club, you are not looking for a way out of the club. No. And I do think, I will say on that note real quick, I think Florida State is positioning themselves towards a Big Ten move with they've just acquired a hospital and they're looking at, the medical research side and stuff. My gut as a football guy, man, I'd love to be in the SEC. I live in the Southeast footprint. There's like 5 or 6 SEC stadiums within what I consider driving distance from my house. I think for Saturdays alone, I understand there's a lot of benefits of the Big Ten from, the money and stuff like that academically, but man, I would love to find us our way into the SEC. It's not that I don't love or hate the ACC. It's just, you can obviously see the way the sport's going. You need to be in one of those two, and the ACC is not one.
And I think you made a good point about the Big Ten, because for them, that on the academic side that we don't talk about as much, the Big Ten really values schools that are in the AAU, which there's only about 100 nationwide. Florida State is one. So,
well, we're not AAU yet.
I thought
they're actively pursuing that, and they're hoping to have it in the future. That's what led to the hospital deal. So,
fingers crossed. Thinking that the hospital came after that. Okay,
fingers crossed. Hopefully,
I'm glad you cleared that up. I wasn't sure. Okay, but that conference wide, and I will say, selfishly, from a Gamecock perspective, I would like for Clemson to be in the same conference as us.
Yeah.
I think that would be cool. Like schedule-wise, we play in the last game every year, which it means your conference schedule is already done, which starting the conference schedule can be tougher, but also it could add even more meaning to that last game of the year.
Oh yeah, we're the same way with Florida.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With that rivalry there at the end of the year. And at least if you end up in the same conference, you know it's protected. Because I would really, really hate, like my biggest fear of leaving the ACC, depending on what happens with Miami, you lose one of the two. You know, if you go to the Big Ten, do you have to pick and choose? Is it Florida or Miami? Because, you know, if you're at 9 conference games,
and
it's going to get tough.
Like you said, Florida's not leaving the SEC. Miami doesn't strike me as a Big Ten fit. So they're probably not leaving.
Yeah. Well, even though I think Miami does have AAU status, though. I do believe they do.
Okay.
So you never know, man. It's crazy. Let's just go to super conferences, get this thing over with.
So one of my brother's stations, Biscuits and SEC, they're Texas A&M guys. You guys could probably have a great episode talking Jimbo.
Yeah, we could.
They recently did a series on Super League, so it's a great 2-part episode.
I'll have to check that out.
If you want to check that out, it was good.
I missed the small, more regional conferences, but you know, I get this is where we're going with money and whatnot. So it's kind of like we're kicking the proverbial can. Let's just get it over with, man. Let's figure this thing out.
Absolutely. But let's dive into Knoll football a little deeper now. So last year, 5-7, which was an improvement over the previous year to be
somehow. Yeah.
But at 5-7, obviously started with the first 2 weeks of the season, you guys were feeling high and doing great.
Man, insane.
Yeah. But then came the tough loss to Virginia in double OTs. Then, you know, the Miami and Pitt games, both of which were battles. Those were games that could have went either way. But, you know, if you're a good team, you can't drop both of them. Then you dropped a game to a very poor Stanford team.
Yeah.
Again, it was close, but I don't care how close it is when you're losing to Stanford.
Yeah, that should, to me, and what a wild, you know, what a wild season that unfolded. You know, we come in, you get Tommy Castellanos, you get Gus Malzahn as your OC, and you're like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll see. And then, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you smacked Alabama in your stadium to open. I mean, 31-17 was no joke. I was there at that game. I remember storming the field with my co-host, and we're looking at each other like, bro, we're going to the playoffs. What is happening right now?
You were looking at him saying, we're so back right now.
We're so back right now. And then, you know, and then you beat East Texas A&M 77-3. Gus Malzahn does that. But you feel like things are clicking. You roll Kent State after that. But for me, I had said during those 3 weeks, I said, man, I am in like trust but verify mode. I need to see this team beat someone else with a pulse. And that was Virginia. And I was at that game. Friday night, I got to see 2 field stormings in the first month of the season.
Wasn't that game in Charlottesville? Or was
it was on a Friday night, double overtime loss. You had plenty of opportunities to win that game. Then I was at the Miami game the next week. That game was not as close as the score indicated.
No, they showed some life in the last 10 minutes, but the game was kind of over by then.
And I feel like a little bit of that was Miami pulling off the gas because that's a Mario Cristobal signature. Yes. And so to me, honestly, dude, I'll be straight up. And I caught a little bit of fire for this, man. I was in the stands, obviously a little pissed at the time, watching that game because it's your rival, man. And you're talking about a guy who's 2 years fewer into his tenure than Mike Norvell is, basically lap you in your own building. And that was when I said, guys, look, I'm just saying I think it's time to make a change at head coach because this is not working. And everybody's like, well. And then Pitt comes, and it was one of the worst games our defense had played all season. I mean, it was bad because that was Mason Heinschel. You know, he's a first freshman start on the road and torched us. And everyone's like, okay, well, you know, one loss a couple losses are piling up. Then the Stanford loss happened. I think everybody was where I was at after the Miami game.
Pitt's one of those, like, to go back to Pitt a little bit. They're extremely well coached with Narduzzi. Yes. Their floor is pretty high. If you have an off night against them, they will beat you. NC State's the same way with Doran. Those two teams will never be elite, I don't think. Yeah. But you can't have an off night against them either.
No, It's like, you know, I mean, no offense to this, but like my brother is a Georgia fan, and he knows like South Carolina is like, you know, they might not be making the playoffs every year in and out, but that's a team you go into Columbia on a Saturday. Yeah. That's like their kryptonite, man. And Pitt's that same team. You can't, I think they almost beat Clemson that same year, the year before that, you know, with a team that's average bowl team. But yeah, man,
I
the
think it went to
Stanford game,
overtime. I think it was an overtime game up in
man.
Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Narduzzi's a team you can never sleep on them, man. They are always a tough out. And Stanford was the game that Mike Norvell should have been fired afterwards. You had a bye week after. It was just the worst showing. I mean, they really what came down to last year. They, other than the Virginia game, they could not score on the road. I think our scoring offense on the road was like 118th in the country. It was awful.
I'm looking at so that Virginia game, you got 38. After that on the road, 13 at Stanford, 10 at Clemson, 11 at NC State, 21 at Florida. And even some of those 21 were late in the game.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just you couldn't score on the road, and it was frustrating to watch. There were so many mistakes. Even the NC State game, you're in that game late, and you have a punt doink off your head, and they recover it, which kills any chance of a comeback.
I forgot about that.
We literally just looked like the bad news Bears last year. And the thing was, you started so high, and it just faded off. And even the wins that you got late, Virginia Tech wasn't a good team. Wake Forest was a good team for Wake Forest, but
it was a very good year one for Jake Dickert, who I think is a heck of a coach.
Yep, and to win 42-7 was good, but
like at Washington State, Jake Dickert's not going to be there long. He's going to get a better job in a couple of years.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And Wake Forest, man, I give it to them. They can hire some coaches. Like they've hit pretty well. So it was such an up and down season, man. But to me, you should have pulled the trigger there after the Stanford game going into that bye week. But obviously, the elephant in the room that's not a secret is the money, the buyout for Mike Norvell, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But that's why he didn't get fired. So then they're like, we're going to put everything behind him and whatever and support him the rest of the way. And then, you go on and you go 3-2 in your last 5 games. And it's just, you miss a bowl. This is now 4 out of 6 years you've missed a bowl. It's just not good enough at Florida State. And so this year, the pressure's on because it feels like what should have happened last year, maybe the admin wasn't ready for that decision. I don't know how they weren't after 2-10, but it feels like they know this year, man, if it doesn't get any better, this is going to have to end at some point.
So the coaching carousel hot seat is kind of my wheelhouse. Let's jump right into 2 things regarding that. You talked about the offense on the road. Your thoughts about Gus leaving?
It's funny when you talk about Gus, right? I think it was okay that he came in from a veteran perspective. Like he's got a lot of experience, but I'm not sad to see him go. And the reason I say that is he's not a creative play caller. We saw a lot of the same stuff over and over last year. There were some limitations on that team with Tommy Castellanos at quarterback. Once he got injured, he couldn't really run like he was supposed to. So I understand all that. I think, for the funny thing is Mike Norvell produced the worst offense we've seen probably in school history in 2024. It was abysmal. It was. But I still think he's a better play caller than Gus Malzahn as far as just it's a little bit more open of the playbook, right? He's got a little bit more passing route trees in there.
And he's Norvell, very creative and effective at running the ball. He finds multiple ways to do it. Going back to Memphis, you had all kinds of running backs that went to the NFL.
Yes, and so you're talking about a guy who comes from the Gus Malzahn tree. So you're going to kind of get like the run aspect of a Gus Malzahn offense with a more pass-heavy offense of the Mike Norvell tree and the things he's learned. So I'm really actually not mad about that. I also, it's no secret, it's kind of been rumored that was not the best relationship last year because, look, when Mike Norvell handed the keys over, it was a pretty much understood fact that he had to. That was not his decision. Yeah. And so he really didn't have control of the offense. That was Gus Malzahn. He got the full keys to the offense. And there were some things with like running back rotations and stuff like that was just mind-boggling last year that Mike Norvell, you could tell he wasn't happy about, but he couldn't do anything about it. So I think that it's going to be a good thing, but it's a gamble. And I'm fair with Mike Norvell gambling on himself in a year that might cost him his job. But, we've seen things, if you go back and look at 21 and 22 and 23, where he schemed some things up when he had some guys to scheme with. But 2024 is the one, it's the most fresh Mike Norvell offense in the back of our mind.
Now, is Norvell going to be the play caller this year? Because that's good enough, because I was not thrilled with the Tim Harris promotion. To me, it was uninspiring. You could have got somebody else. But if Norvell's calling plays, that does add good context to that. And honestly, if it's a do or die season, you're going to want to be in control of your own fate as opposed to having somebody else.
Yeah, and the Tim Harris thing was kind of weird, right? Before Gus Malzahn announced his retirement, just really kind of out of nowhere, they promoted him to co-OC, and you were like, that's kind of weird. Our offense wasn't really that good last year. Why did they do that? I think it was they knew what was coming. And then Gus Malzahn retires. He goes into the OC, de facto OC kind of role there. And we had that in 23 with Alex Atkins, our offensive line coach, who was serving in the role of OC, but was not the primary play caller. So it will be Mike
a guy
Norvell,
whose star fell really quick.
Boy, howdy.
We were thinking G5 head coach soon.
Yeah, and then LSU, I think like he goes to LSU as the run game coordinator, and it's like one of the worst run games in the country. So yeah, Mike Norvell will be the primary play caller for the offense this year, and Tim Harris will be, helping with game planning and game day inputs and stuff like that. So we'll see how it goes. Like you said, man, I get him putting it on his shoulders. I just wonder what's going to happen 2024 or like a 22-23 type of offense, because man, he's got so much successful history as a play caller. It's mind-boggling what's happened in Tallahassee. And it really is.
I did like the Trey Wisner edition a lot. I think he's a good fit for that offense.
Yeah.
But let's talk another, some coaching stuff. The elephant in the room. Say Norvell gets fired. Say that if this year doesn't go well, I want to hear who would you like them to target, and who do you think realistic candidates are?
It's tough. I will say our AD, he likes to kind of go big a little bit. So I would like to see if, I don't know how real it was, but there was rumors that they contacted Lane Kiffin. I'm sure
it would have made sense. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes, man. I think the thing is, to me, there's kind of two ways to look at this, and this is why I'll actually back it up to this year. I think if they would have fired him this year, I think the smart hire that I said personally, and I know this gets mixed reactions in the Florida State community, was James Franklin, because there was no secret he kind of wanted that job, and it came down to Florida State or Virginia Tech. And the reason I say that is a lot of people go, well, why would you want James Franklin when his ceiling is apparently limited, right? His record against top 25 teams are terrible.
Because we won 7 games in 2 years. That's why I want it.
Exactly. and so, I got Virginia Tech friends that are like, listen, man, I'll take the record against the top 25 if it means winning 9 to 10 games a year, because that's what they need. Well, the complicated part for Florida State is if Mike Norvell's buyout is going to be about $8.5 million a year, I think until like 2031.
Is that much? Oh, I didn't realize it was that long.
It's a long. It was a long contract. And so the thing is, you are now going to be shouldering the weight of an $8 million buyout, and you're going to have to hire this next coach, which is going to cost you $10-12 million. You can't fire the next guy until you get out from under Mike Norvell's buyout. Florida State just doesn't have the bankroll to pay.
You have guaranteed whoever you're hiring, they will be there for 4 years. Right. Franklin would be a guy I'd be okay having you for 4 years.
You get it, man. That's exactly my point. It's like he can stabilize the ship, recruit well enough in the state of Florida to where after you get out from under Mike Norvell's buyout, if things didn't go as good as you wanted, maybe it's like a Nebraska Bo Pelini situation. Like, look, man, 9 wins just ain't good enough. We're going to go in a different direction. Or it did go good one way or the other, but it probably wasn't going to go bad. But, that ship has sailed. But the precedent of having that buyout looming over you is still there. So whoever you hire needs to be the most proven you can get. And there's a few names that I really like.
The other two guys, say they had done it last season, and, when we were wondering if they were, Chesney was a guy I thought would have been a decent one. Was it James Madison, now at UCLA? And then Eric Morse. It was a heck of a coach at North Texas.
Yeah.
So that would have been another one. But they didn't.
The hard part is, do you go after another G5 guy, right? And we'll see how this works at Florida, because they had Billy Napier, didn't really work out. They went after another G5 guy. We'll see how that works out.
Who, in Summerall's defense, did it at multiple schools, not just one. So I think there's some more track record there.
Yeah, and so will Florida State fans be moved by another G5 hire? I don't know. Now, for me, I would give you just a couple names off the top of my head. I like Mike Shanahan from Indiana, offensive coordinator. If you could get him, he's proven he can do it with different quarterbacks at different schools. I like that. One of the names, man, I really like is Glenn Schumann, DC at Georgia.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because me and my co-host actually had this conversation the last time. Like, man, you see Dane Lanning at Oregon, Kirby Smart at Georgia, Ryan Day. A lot of these guys were coordinators before they were head coaches, but they had no head coaching experience. So it's not like you were going out and getting some proven guy. But what do they all have in common? Pedigree. They came from the Sabans. They came from the Alabamas, the Kirby Smarts, the Ohio States. They know how to win at the highest level. They know how to recruit like a dog on the trail.
Another guy in that vein who I could throw on that mix with Schumann, Kane Momack, who was a coordinator, then was head coach at South Alabama, now is back at Alabama as the D coordinator. That would be another guy in that vein who I think will be a head coach again.
Yeah, and that's my thing. As long as you get a guy with proven pedigree, I'd be willing to take a little bit more chance on that. Now, of course, Brian Hartline at South Florida, that's a complicated one because I feel like
I wasn't moved by that hire. I think he has a lot to prove to me.
Yeah, that's a hard one because for me, it's like, okay, if you fired Mike Norvell this year, is 1 year at South Florida going to be enough to convince you to, in the situation that we're in? No, I don't think so. But if Mike Norvell gets, say, let's just say 2 to 3 more years tops, and Hartline does good at South Florida, you better get him before somebody else does.
Another guy in Florida who did well in year one, if Willie Simmons keeps winning at FIU, I would consider him. I think he's a heck of a coach.
It's funny. I actually saw that name mentioned this morning. Former FAMU guy, so he's very familiar with Tallahassee. That's a name to watch. I don't know how fans would perceive that, but
that's fair.
But you just got to win games.
But him, and then you have. I'm talking CUSA guys, but him and Jerry Mack at Kennesaw, both great year ones. If they have another year or two of good seasons, they're going to get bigger jobs.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
The one I had thrown this one out there as a potential Florida State guy because you had mentioned your AD likes to go big, and we have a guy who I think his team could potentially be a playoff team this year. But if he ends up moving, what about Lincoln Riley?
That's tough. Yeah,
it's tough. You know he's going to listen to you if you are out there, and
it feels like it's getting stale out at USC too.
Though, yeah, they were better last year. Low key, I think they might be a playoff team this year. I think Maib is going to be really good, and they had the best recruiting class in the country last year.
Given the current status of where we're at as a program, I couldn't say no.
Yeah, but I think in part what you were saying about some are perceiving it to go stale, and the expectations now, they're really high. I mean, if he even has an 8-4 year, it might be Lincoln, we're not going to fire you, but if you want to take another job, you don't have to pay us and we won't pay you. We'll just see you later. That could happen.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And now that you're in the Big Ten, it's even more competitive. So you don't want to be one of the mid-tier teams of the Big Ten. And so if something did happen, it'd be impossible to say no to him, to be honest, right now.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought, process of who would be potential guys they could go after. Because you brought up a good point, with the G5 ones. Most schools, you don't make the same mistake of the guy you just fired, which would be an offensive-minded G5 guy, like a couple of the ones I threw out there.
Yeah. So, and the tough part about it nowadays is because it's so NIL-driven, like whoever you get has to inspire the donors to come out of the woodwork and give money, or else, I mean, yes, you could prove it by winning on the field, and then naturally people are going to get behind you, but you still got to win in year one. And we have Georgia coming up to open the season like the next 2 years, I think in 27, 28, not this year, but the next couple of years. So you need the early momentum of the donors to give him a good roster in year one so you can come out and win and get that momentum. So whoever you hire, I'm not saying it has to be like the biggest name, but after what you got right now, I don't think it can be just kind of like no offense to Willie Simmons, I just don't think it's going to move the needle with donors right now.
And a guy who might be the dream hire or one of them, but I don't know that you could pull him, would be former Seminole O coordinator Kenny Dillingham. I don't know if you're getting him away from his, he's at his alma mater. That would be a tough sell. If you could get him, you take him in a second.
Yeah, definitely.
But that would be
that'd be a tough pull.
Tough one, I think. The other one.
And he's friends with Mike, so you'd be asking him to kind of. You know what I mean? Take Mike's job after he got fired. So that would be a tough one, but I would take him.
The Gamecock in me would throw out another former OC. What if the Gamecocks light the world on fire. Is Kendall Briles in the mix for a job like that?
He's already. I was about to say he's already been with Florida State once, so
that's why I mentioned it as a guy that has a history there. But
and then there is the one guy who happens to live in Tallahassee and is currently unemployed. Well, he works for the ACC network now.
He does for the ACC network now. Yeah,
but there's that name that's always
We're talking about West Virginia native Jimbo Fisher, of course, for my fellow Marshall people who are watching.
Yes, which I have heard there is no way that's going to happen, but we'll see, man.
I will be curious, for Jimbo, if he wants to coach again. I think that's a big if. I don't think we know the answer, but with the money he is making or has made from A&M, you can be about as picky as you want to be in looking at a job. And with our Biscuits and SEC guys, we had this talk of the schools that he might want. They might not want to hire him, but the schools that would hire him, he's made too much money. He's like, why would I want to go to that level? So you might be in that weird mix of between the two, and maybe he doesn't coach anymore.
I think that's I think he's waiting for a certain job or two that he would really like. I thought West Virginia probably should have hired him a few years ago. Florida State, I don't think it'll happen, but I proposed one, just a fictitious thing. But I was like, man, he's got so much money. What if you just said, Jimbo, you give us a sweetheart contract to help us get out from under Mike Norvell's buyout.
Yeah.
And we'll let you run until, his buyout ends, and then we'll reevaluate things. And say he comes in making really, really good coordinator money.
Yeah.
Does he do that? You know what I mean? Just to be like, hey, if you want it.
If you could get him to do it for 2.5 a year or less, I think
I'd take that deal in a heartbeat.
Yeah. The other one I wonder for him, a place he used to coach, if Cincinnati has a down year, they were pretty good with Satterfield last year after bad years. Jimbo used to be there. Would he go to a Cincinnati? I think they're in that realm of, does he want to take a job there? Is that a little beneath what he wants? But it also would be a realistic one, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Who knows? But I do like Tony White as a D coordinator. We haven't talked about him yet. I mean, he pretty good history there. Was that
there is no one who's better at a podium than Tony White. Like, he will get your juices flowing during a press conference. Last year was a bit up and down, obviously. People are questioning how the 3-3-5 is going. A lot of people don't like it. It worked at NC State for a number of years, so I'm not saying that it can't work. I think there were some personnel limitations on that defense last year. Some players they took in the portal that just did not work out, that they really were banking on working out. James Williams being really the poster child of that. But it's year 2. And so I do think, he talked about in spring, he's like, look, man, we're doing things in spring right now that we weren't doing until the season last year. So I do think, obviously, year 2, you get a lot of turnover in some of the starters, but I think there's like 9 guys on the defense who started at least one game last year that are back. So I think year 2 with some returning experience, I do think you'll see a little bit of a bump. Now, you got a really, really tough schedule coming up this year, but I do think the defense will take a little step up.
They'll have to. Yeah, but I think that's a very good point there. And for him, it's good background, but that, the way the alignment there, that doesn't always work. Rich Rod has gotten it to work at West Virginia. Like you said, NC State did it. Marshall did it last year because Tony Gibson came here from NC State.
Yeah.
Then they scrapped it about halfway through the season because it wasn't working.
Yeah, I mean, he's very multiple. Like, they run a lot of 4-man fronts and things like that. But the thing was, he even said in his press conference, he said, look, the origination, I'm not like a 3-3-5 guy. Yes, it's my base defense. He said, but I did that because a lot of the places I started coaching, you couldn't recruit 4 really high-level, big-body defensive linemen.
No.
Especially on the interior. So at a place like Florida State, you can do that a little bit. So he does get away from the 3-3-5 quite a bit. But I think he's given the makeup of the room this year in the D line. I know he likes to be multiple, but you're probably going to see a little bit more of that 3-3-5 because we're kind of thin at interior defensive line. So it'll be interesting.
And some of their D tackles, like the 2 Desirs, they're not big dudes.
No.
Like, weight-wise, you do have the one monster with Kevin Wynn, who's just a wide body. But you don't have a lot of girth, up front. So
and then the problem is Kevin Wynn's only played about 40, 50 snaps in college because he was hurt most of last year. Now, he's a super talented guy.
Yeah. And you also wonder at that size, how's his stamina going to be?
Right. And like, we need him to play 400 to 500 snaps this year, period. Yes. And then you're looking at really the guy they're counting on right now in the interior is Daniel Lyons, 6'4", about 300-pound redshirt senior.
Yeah.
A guy that's like struggled to put it together throughout his career, but supposedly has taken on the challenge of being that guy this year. So again, sounds good at a podium, but how's it going to look on Saturday? That's what we need. But really, interior defensive tackle is probably my biggest concern on this defensive line right now.
An interesting guy, and I saw him play in person last year, who I think could be a promising portal guy, is Jordan Sanders, who was at Texas State. So
yeah, that's an interesting one, man, because he's got some size. He was banged up in spring, from what I understand.
But okay. Yeah.
But I heard it's not going to be anything that's going to carry on. He was a guy that was like kind of, you just didn't know how it was going to translate. But I mean, we need the depth, so we'll take him. And he's got a really good body type for the interior, so we needed the depth for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let's
I was gonna say, really on the defensive line, though, the good thing is if they get multiple, I mean, it's a young group, but you've got some guys that, I mean, obviously Mandrell Desir was a dude for you last year, a freshman, just sensation. His brother Darrell was actually the more higher rated recruit, and he didn't quite have the year, but he came on strong the rest of the year. So you got a couple of guys there. I like Deontay McCray, former Western Kentucky transfer. He was good for you as well, banged up a little bit. Diamante Diggs is a really lengthy, tools-heavy defensive end that came in from Coastal Carolina, but was just injured and missed most of the season last year. Of course, Ryland.
My depth chart, I said that he graduated and wasn't on it, so I'm glad you told me Diggs is back.
I believe he got some kind of waiver, possibly. Okay. And then Ryland Kennedy is really the one they're banking on, kind of the gamble from Texas A&M. Didn't play a whole lot there, but the physical tools are there. And then Jalen Anderson was one of the best defensive ends in the portal from the JUCO level.
Yes.
So, it's not a deep group, but they got a couple pieces that I really like.
I think that's well said and good to know. Let's get it more into the roster. So we talked about the D line. Now at that linebacker position, you got some new guys, but Gabayor, Chris Jones, you could be all right at that position, I think. But again, it's another one with a lot of unknowns. Gabayor's coming in from North Carolina.
Yeah.
Chris Jones at Southern Miss. So.
Yeah, linebacker was pretty bad for us last year. A lot of that had to do with a lack of athleticism at the position we could not cover to save our life. That really compounded a lot of the issues with the defensive line. But, Omar Graham comes back. He's a former starter, 2-year starter pretty much. Again, he's a guy who's not excellent at the linebacker position. I would say average, maybe average ACC linebacker type of level, but he's got a ton of experience. And so he's a guy that can at least be, as you would call like that green dot guy who's maybe the center of your defense. Okay. Chris Jones is the one everybody's got circled. I mean, this guy, I think it was like 130 tackles at Southern Miss last year. Insane.
I knew a decent amount about him because one of the guys I work with does Locked on Ole Miss, and he originally committed to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So they've done some stuff on him. Yeah.
That's the one we're really hoping turns into, like, if you remember Tatum Bethune from 22 and 20 or 23, came over from UCF, was a 100+ tackler, great linebacker for us. Maybe not a great pro prospect, nothing like that, but just a solid college linebacker. And that's what we need. And that's what I think you're going to get out of Chris Jones as a thumper, 232 pounds. But Blake Nicholson, former blue chip linebacker out of California. That's a guy, the Bayer kid that you're talking about coming out of North Carolina. Remember, he also played for Tony White at Nebraska for a couple of years too, so he knows that defense.
Oh, I forgot. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. He started, I think, for Tony White there for a year, and then went to North Carolina. Was not a starter there, but did play a little bit. He's a more athletic guy. Caleb LaValle, another former North Carolina transfer from 2 years ago, showed out in their bowl game against UConn. Got hurt, missed all of last year. So you have a couple guys that you're looking at that are a little bit more athletic. Obviously, have Isaiah Williams, the best linebacker recruit we've signed in a decade. So there's some talent there, but there's a lot of holdback from just what we saw last year. But Ernie Sims is our linebacker coach, so you feel good. I feel so much better about the position this year than I did last year.
Good. Yeah, no, and we talked about that improvement. You just got to get better everywhere else. Then at the defensive backfield, another one where you're bringing in some new guys. Mekhi Jones, comes in from Duke, conference rival. And then CJ Richard was good FCS player at Illinois State.
Yeah.
And they had a good run. They made the actually, I think they made the national championship.
Yeah, I think they were the runner-up.
They were, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they beat North Dakota State, who was undefeated up until that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Early on. Yeah.
Yeah, but, you got some good additions in here, man. So you bring back Jabril Rawls, who's your top corner right now. He's, with all intents and purposes, probably an NFL type of guy, right? He's pretty darn good. Other than that, it's kind of feeling it out, right? You got Ashland Barker comes back at safety. He started for you pretty much all last year. He's a big, rangy guy. He can play that kind of rover position in Tony White's defense.
He is a big guy.
Yeah, he's essentially like a third line, or a fourth linebacker, basically playing at the safety position. He'll probably fill in for Earl Little in that rover, where you don't really want to get them exposed in coverage, but they can come up and run support and be that kind of field safety for you. CJ Richard is another name that we're talking about that you mentioned that I think is going to be in the mix at safety with Mekhi Jones. Nehemiah Chandler is a guy coming in from South Alabama that I'm really interested to see. He had an insane amount of PBUs last year, led the Sun Belt, I think 13 PBUs or something like that last year. Yeah.
That's one game. That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, that's a guy that we're looking at might be one of the next one. KJ Kirkland, another talented guy there. The thing is, so we also just changed DB coaches. So we got Blue Adams came in from Michigan State out with Patrick Surtain. The thing with Patrick Surtain is, like, no disrespect to him, he was an elite recruiter. I mean, I'm looking at Charles Lester, 5-star on this roster. You got a couple of guys that have come in. There's no shortage of talent in the back end of this defense. It's just getting the most out of it. We haven't really seen that the last 2 years. So my hope is the clay is there. Now maybe the person molding them in year 2 of Tony White's defense, it'll just be a little bit better, because there's no shortage of talent in the secondary.
The one I wanted to ask you about in transferring was Carson Hobbs that came in from Notre Dame. Did he do much in the spring? What's he looking like? Man,
this is one where, like, I hate to talk bad about anyone until I see him play for us, but I went back and I watched the film on him at Notre Dame. Wasn't overly impressed. And that's just that's my honest opinion. Like, people can go back and watch the film for themselves. Kind of very, very active without making a lot of impact. You know what I mean? So that's one.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, again, you're talking about depth is always a good thing. So I won't complain about having an experienced guy who comes from a school like Notre Dame, but from what I watched on the tape last year, it just wasn't super great. I mean, I don't usually put a ton of stock into PFF grades, but like, his PFF grade last year was 48.4 and his tackle grade was 28.8. Like,
that's low.
There's some room for improvement. So I don't know how much. I don't see him being a starter. I think that's more of a depth guy this year. But again, you can never have enough.
That's fair. Yeah. Then let's move to the offensive side of the ball. So I think QB is a great place to start. I'll be the first one to say it's
a tough place to start.
Not super inspired by Ashton Daniels, from what we saw at Stanford and Auburn. Didn't play a ton last year at Auburn. I was surprised they picked him as the guy. Or did they whiff on all the other guys they went after in the portal?
So, it's funny. There's that saying that doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Well, I guess we're just insane right now, because we're just rinse cycling the bargain bin quarterback and method, and it's not working. And so I'm not sure why we did it. Like, we took DJU in 24, as a guy that you got for, rumor was, around $900,000 at the time, under $1 million. Let's just say
that. And he had been good at Oregon State the year before.
Right. And so, maybe not lived up to his recruiting hype, but was decent at Oregon State. Comes in, just performed badly, ended up getting replaced due to a hand injury. Then you go to Tommy Castellanos, a guy that everyone kind of knew what he was before he got here. You thought maybe you could get more out of him than you did. You didn't. And so now it's like, okay, so 2 years in a row, you took what I like to call, quote unquote, broken quarterback to try and make him into something in his last year of eligibility. And it didn't work 2 years in a row. So what do? You go do it a third year in a row with Ashton Daniels. And I mean, the physical tools are there for him. He's got some size, 6'2", 230. He can run the ball. He's ran it successfully before, but his history that precedes him, it is what it is, man. And the thing is, at some point in your career, it stops becoming, well, we can fix it. It starts becoming, well, maybe this is just who you are, right? I mean, 24 touchdowns to 22 career interceptions with a 60% career completion percentage. You know, his last year at Stanford, he threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. That's a tough pill to swallow for Florida State fans. It's hard to get excited about that. What we're booing, or at least me, what I buoy my hope to for him this year, and let me back this up and just say one thing. You also have to remember that Ashton Daniels was signed when Gus Malzahn was still our offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So he fit the Gus system.
Because he came in pretty early in the portal.
Exactly.
If I remember, yeah.
And so now you're putting him in a more pass-heavy offense, which has been his weakness. But my hope anyway, is you go back and you look at Auburn. He did lose that game, or did lose that starting job to a guy who ended up getting benched after Hugh Freeze got fired. So it's not like there was a lot of confidence in him from Auburn. But then when he took over, you know, he had a better offense for his skill set. He wasn't being asked to play in the more pro-style offense that they ran at Stanford before when he had all the struggles. But he comes in, and the Kentucky game was abysmal. It was really bad. 46% completion percentage with no touchdowns and a pick. But then, man, he lit Vanderbilt up. I mean, 66% completion percentage, 353 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. Vandy's defense, I think, was 118th in pass defense. It wasn't good. Then he comes in and lights up Alabama, man. I mean, 259 yards and a touchdown, considering they dropped 7 passes in that game. And he also ran for a pretty good amount against both teams here. Now, PFF uses sack-adjusted stats. So against Vanderbilt, 104 sack-adjusted rush yards. Against Alabama, 114. So I think when you talk about Ashton Daniels, am I confident in his arm? No. Am I confident in the whole package? That I can look at and say, okay, maybe I can understand why maybe they did some things, or maybe not why they took him, but can he work out with the legs? I think, because when you think back to Jordan Travis, the one quarterback Mike Norvell's actually had success with, he was a runner, or at least had the threat of a run.
Yes.
And so Mike Norvell has done a lot better with a run threat at quarterback, a dual threat quarterback. So you get that from Ashton Daniels. Really, it's just going to come down to the arm. We heard about some turnover issues surfacing in the spring, which is what he's had his whole career. So that's just kind of something you're probably going to have to live with this year. But, you know, I know we'll get into receivers in a minute, but you got a guy like Deuce Robinson out here to throw to. So that should help a little bit. So this is a gamble, man. I really do think the quarterback position is going to be, as we get into more of the talk about the offense, probably the bottleneck of the position or the offense. Yeah. But if he can be, you know, 20% better than what you got out of Thomas Castellanos, you can at least win 7-8 games, maybe. Man, this is the one thing that was tough. And to give you the backstory on it, the new GM that they brought in, John Garrett from Duke, said, he goes, okay, well, we had a conversation in the offseason. They asked about how they came to this, you know, the quarterback decision that they did. And they said, well, we all came together and asked if we wanted to get in the expensive quarterback waters, because obviously Miami down the road makes the news headlines with the $10 million Mensa acquisition. Well, they said collectively as a staff, they chose not to do that. And so that was a kind of a puzzling decision to me, because the guy just came from Duke. We're paying $4 million for a quarterback, won you your first ACC championship in like 50 years. Yeah. So, you know, they had Calandria on campus. It just really, the numbers didn't match up. They had Lagway on there. I'm sure the numbers probably didn't match. They didn't want to pay that much for it. Yeah. So here we settle for another around $1 million quarterback. And, you know, the last thing I'll say on that is you kind of get what you pay for. You're seeing a lot of the quarterbacks, you know, again, the perfect example is 2024. You went budget, not saying we would have gotten Cam Ward. I think he was headed to Miami or the NFL anyway. Miami paid up for Cam Ward. They won 10 games. It kind of propelled them into what they did last year. Yeah. We went cheap with DJU. We got corresponding results. That's kind of how it is. So, you know, if you want to swim in that waters, that's the results you're going to get. And until they're willing to kind of pay up for the quarterback position, I think this is kind of just where we're going to be at.
I think that's well said. Yeah, especially when you're looking at that position and known commodities, the guys that are really successful in the portal, yeah, your failure rate is way lower than with a guy like Daniels, or it was with DJU, who had been mixed bags before that.
Yeah, and one of the things that compounds the issue real quick is that they have struck out at high school quarterback since they got here. And it's made worse. Willie Taggart did not sign a high school quarterback in 18 and 19. Mike takes over in 20.
Oh, geez.
It's the COVID year. You can't go out and make relationships. You can't go out and scout in person. So you grab two guys. You got Chubba Purdy, Brock Purdy's little brother, who ended up getting hurt, didn't work out, and Tate Rodemaker, who transferred out. You didn't sign one in 2020 because you had a terrible season. And they've just whiffed on high school quarterbacks ever since. So they have to keep going to the portal, but they don't want to spend up in the portal. So you're like, it's just
Cromwell Hook was a decent recruit that you whiffed on. You
didn't like you're not investing in either side. Like pick one and just go either invest in a good transfer quarterback or invest in a good high school quarterback, develop them and give them the reins. So we were hoping that might have been Kevin Sperry, but he did lose the spring battle to Ashton Daniels, which is no surprise to anybody.
No. And then one of the guys I had on a while back was Western Kentucky, and Brock Glenn is there now. So
yeah, that's interesting, man. Again, that's another one. He was committed to Ohio State, and we flipped him from Ohio State, and just never worked out. So they're they did so good with not really big name quarterbacks at Memphis. It blows my mind how they can't develop a quarterback here. I don't get it.
Yeah,
other than Jordan Travis, but I think a lot of that was Kenny Dillingham.
Certainly could have been. Yeah, and Travis might even have come in under the last year of Kendall Briles too.
Yeah, he was not a Mike Norvell transfer. No. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that, and for many of his faults, Jimbo did quite well with quarterbacks and has always done quite well with quarterbacks.
Yeah, he might have a few misses, but he signs so many good quarterbacks that, I mean, he can
and knows how to develop them. And knows how to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah.
The running back room, I am excited about. You have Chroma coming back to go with Trey Wisner, who I expect will be the bell cow coming from Texas. And then Jamari Sands was decent at FAU also coming in. So you have three guys that should be able to, run the ball for you well, provided the O-line can.
Oh, yeah. This is by far the most excited I am about any position group at Florida State this year is the running back position. I think we are pretty much loaded. A lot of this will depend on what the offensive line shakes out to be because we have 5 new starters. I know we'll get into that in a second. But, you're talking about Chroma, who as a freshman, a true freshman, put up 405 yards last year, a guy who's uber talented. I mean, you flipped him from Georgia last minute. That was a massive recruiting win for Mike Norvell, probably one of the biggest recruiting wins he's had since he's been here. Then you bring in Wisner, however you say it. Man, this is the guy that I think is really, really going to be good for us this year. He was a 1,000-yard back on a playoff team in 2024 at Texas. Didn't quite get the workload because of injury last year, but you also look at the averages, and he was on this par of what he did in 2024. So he's a consistent producer. To your point, Jamari Sands, a guy that put up almost 500 yards last year as well at the G5
in
level.
A team that rarely ran the ball.
Yeah, and so those are 3 good backs I like. Another one I'll put on your radar here is Sam Singleton Jr. Put up 360 yards last year and 4 touchdowns. Very explosive, speedy back. And we also have a new running back coach this year, Cam Martin. This guy has produced a 1,000-yard rusher at, I think, the last 4 seasons at like 2 or 3 different schools. And so this is a guy that it's so weird, man. Like he actually was a running back coach under Gus Malzahn. So like we brought in a quarterback for Gus Malzahn. We brought in his running back coach. We got we got all of Gus Malzahn's guys and Gus just left. So I don't know how that works out,
and for those out there, Martin comes in from Tulane where he was with John Summerall and they ran the ball extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for what the running back room can be this year, and I think you're going to need it. And once you factor in Ashton Daniels into that too, I think the running game is going to be our strong point by far. It's just, will the pass game be enough to allow teams not to load the box? That's the big question.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't become one-handed. You have to have the threat of throwing the ball to open up lanes for those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
The receiving group, I think they look okay, relative to a lot of the position groups. Deuce Robinson's a heck of a player. I mean, the guy had almost 100 targets last year. That doesn't just happen. And then Micaiah Danzy's not bad either.
Yeah, for sure. So Deuce is a guy, obviously, you get him. He produced at USC 2 years in a row, around 300 to 500 yards each year. So he was kind of like producing but waiting to break out. And then that was last year. Now, Gus Malzahn, I wonder how it's going to go this year because Gus Malzahn's offense typically features one main receiver. The second guy kind of gets worked in there a little bit, and then it's just a void after that. He was our first 1,000-yard receiver. I think we've had one since like 2014. It's been insane, the run of receivers struggles that we've had. But outside of Tamori and Terry, we haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver in some time.
Did Keon Coleman not get 1,000?
No, he didn't. Okay. Now we've had some really close. Like I think Johnny Wilson had like 990 or something like that in one year. But
Deuce, the two tallest receivers in America.
Exactly, man. And like back to back, it's been great. And so you get Deuce back, an experienced guy, put up 1,000 yards. Obviously, there's no secret in who Deuce is now, so everyone's going to be keying in on him. Can he produce the same way? But he's just really, really good, and he's going to get better in another year of experience. So he's obviously going to be your lead guy. The other guys here, Mekhi Danzy, as you mentioned, track star. That's the thing to know with him is he has elite speed, but he was a redshirt freshman last year, so he played like no snaps as a freshman. So everything he did last year was 90% on just pure athletic ability. So now he has a year with a couple hundred snaps under his belt of actually playing the receiver position, how to run routes, how to catch the ball correctly. And so I think he has a chance to really break out as well. And then the other two that I'll put on your radar here, Javon Boggs, as some people have heard of, man, really, really highly touted recruit that actually followed Gus over from UCF. He really injury prone last year, didn't really get a chance to prove himself. But one of the things we heard all throughout camp, spring, summer, into fall, if you ask the player, who is one of the guys, who is the guy on this team to know about? Literally everybody said Javon Boggs. Okay. He just did not really get a chance to prove himself. So if he can be what he's made out to be, I think that's a really good third receiver for you. And then Devin Carter coming in as a freshman, that's a guy that made a lot of noise in camp. And so you would think, and so you would think that he would be able to be another guy that probably doesn't contribute a lot, but at the same time, probably going to be at least a guy that can get in the mix at certain points. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you went, down the pecking order there because there was really only 3 or 4 of those guys that I really knew much about. So
yeah, it's not a deep group. Jason Lopez is another guy that's a freshman. It's not a deep group by any means, but I think if they can stay healthy, the ones they got are pretty good.
Yeah. And the other thing that surprised me, and this might, go towards, some of the struggles they had throwing the ball, but their ADOT last year was ridiculously high, which means it's average depth of throw for those of you out there. So they're, most of their good receivers, I mean, you'll see average depth of throws in the between 8 and 12 yards. These guys, Deuce Robinson, 17, Danzy, 17.6, Squirrel White was over 19, Elijah Moore over 19. You're throwing the ball that far. Yes, you're going to turn it over more. You're going to get sacked more. More bad things are going to happen. Yeah. But you also didn't really have a short game, so you didn't have an alternative last year.
Yeah, we had a spray and pray offense last year. Yeah. Like it was just throw it downfield and hope Deuce or Danzy can get open and catch it.
Because you weren't accurate enough to have a short intermediate game.
Exactly.
Really.
And that's what we need this year is more of a short intermediate game. And what concerns me is the things we just talked about. Like I think Florida State really, and I want to use this in context, like maybe not the best in the country, but I think Florida State in the ACC is loaded at the skill positions. The question is, what is going to happen around them? Is the offensive line going to be good enough to allow those backs to work? Is it going to be good enough to give Ashton Daniels time? And is Ashton Daniels going to be good enough to take advantage of the skill positions around him? That's why I feel like they really should have kind of went a little bit more all in on a quarterback this year because you had the pieces around you that if you had a good quarterback, not saying Ashton Daniels can't be good. I don't want to say that because he could certainly surprise us to the upside when you look at some of the things that he's done. Man, if you had if you had Jordan Travis, 23 Jordan Travis or 22 Jordan Travis on this team, this might be a 9-win team.
I agree. Yes. I mean, the talent is certainly there to win 8 or 9, I think, but we'll talk about this more near the end, but that schedule is tough too.
It is.
So
it definitely is.
Now let's move on briefly. Tight ends, we just talked about the receivers now at the tight end spot. Most of the guys that played a lot are gone. So you did bring in DeCerio Riles, who was a good tight end at ECU. So it's funny, in doing some work with one of the guys that worked for Locked On Vandy, they brought in Javante Connor, who was the other tight end at ECU, and then you guys brought in Riles. So, he was a guy who last year, almost 400 yards receiving, caught a pair of touchdowns, is a dual threat. He was a guy pretty good blocking and good in the receiving game, which was not as much the case with Connor. So,
I think what they're trying to capture here, and this is a name that you'll remember very well, Jaheim Bell.
Yes.
Right? They got him from South Carolina in 23, kind of that not traditional tight end body, that kind of shorter, stockier, almost like a guy you can use as an H-back or move all over the field.
Yeah.
Mike Norvell, now Bell got injured in 2023 and we saw him start really hot and kind of fade a little bit, but I think Mike Norvell's trying to capture that again. Like, let me get that kind of Swiss Army knife of a tight end. I think that's what they're hoping for here. And then you have Landon Thomas, who is a former 5-star recruit, probably 4-star depending on where you look. Super talented kid, actually went into the portal, came back out of the portal, thank goodness, because he's one of our best tight ends that we got.
I didn't know he returned, so that he was not on my list. I didn't know he came back.
Yes, he did come back, and that was a really, really huge addition to get him back. Other than that, you really only have one more that I'd probably be looking at, and that's Chase Lofton, former 4-star coming out of, I think he was like the number 1 or 2 player in Nebraska. He actually worked a lot at the receiver position, so he could be more of that pass-catching tight end. But again, injury bug bit him last year as well. He's supposed to be healthy this year. So you got 3 tight ends that I feel pretty good about all the way across the board. You might see like the Gavin Markey, a converted quarterback guy, come in as like a blocker.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I feel okay. Mike Norvell doesn't use the tight end position a ton.
No.
But I feel good that you have enough to suffice for the needs that he will use them this year.
Okay. No, that's good. Yeah. Now looking at O-line wise, a lot of changes there.
A lot.
I do think, a promising one is Xavier Chaplin, who was a massive guy in the portal who, will be at his 3rd school, I believe. He had initially started at Virginia Tech, then was at Auburn last year, coming in, and I would be shocked if he doesn't start at left tackle.
Yeah, I think he will. Yeah. I mean, Florida State's offensive line, and for those who are Florida State fans that watch this and are listening, they'll know exactly what I'm about to talk about. Florida State's offensive line has been its Achilles heel probably since the 2014, 2015 team. Like, I think we had, I just did this for the draft, and I apologize, I forget, but we've pretty much had 1 offensive lineman drafted since the national championship team in 2023.
Oh, wow.
It's unreal. I mean, it is unreal how many we've had the offensive line struggles. And so the good thing is Herb Hand, the offensive line coach that followed Gus Malzahn over from UCF last year, he's a really good offensive line coach, a lot of experience. He actually got that unit to be respectable last year.
Okay.
The difference between last year and this year was, like, last year you took Luke Pettibon, who was the number 1 graded returning center in the ACC. You got Micah Pettis, who was a top 10 returning tackle out of the SEC. You had a starter, Gunnar Hansen, coming over from Vandy. You had, the guy, another guy, a returning starter from Florida that had played for you last year and got hurt. So you had very high floor guys. This year's a little bit different. To your point, Chaplin is probably your highest ceiling, highest floor guy. Was really, really good at Virginia Tech. Was labeled as, unfortunately, one of the portal busts last year.
Yeah.
A lot of that, I think they have figured out since then that he has a hearing impediment. And that's why he had so many penalties. So they are trying to figure things out. Because if you look at, like, his penalties at home versus on the road, it is so different. So they've kind of keyed into this. So that might have been a big problem there for him that hopefully we have figured out. But you're getting 5 new starters across the board, which always makes you nervous.
Yeah.
So that's probably your projected left tackle.
At the right tackle spot, now, do you think it'll be Paps from Bowling Green or that Nwaiwu who came from FCS?
I think it's going to be, and I struggle with this one too. Chimdia Nwayu, I think it's going to be him. I think he will be your right tackle. And I think Nate Paps will slide into right guard. He's a guy who's played both positions at Bowling Green. So he could, if it was a situation where you needed a third tackle to slide out, I think you probably slide him to tackle before you trust anybody else. I think he's going to be the Nwayu is going to be your starting right tackle. Then you'll see Nate Paps slide in to be your starting right guard. Starting left guard, I would actually go with a homegrown guy, Andre Otto. I think he's going to be, 6'5", 315 redshirt junior, a guy who has played for them a little bit here. Not a ton of experience, but he's kind of been their most often used guy from the offensive, kind of like from the reserve group. And so he's one. And then center will probably be Braden Joyner, transfer from Purdue. Yep. I think he's going to be the guy there. Now, a couple of the other ones that I would watch here that will be in the mix, obviously.
There's a guy from Troy that they got that I was wondering.
Yep. Paul Bowling. He's probably going to be another. He was center guard at Troy, so he could probably be either or. But my next episode for this show next Monday is Troy. That's funny. That's funny. Well, they'll probably be sad that they lost him because he was really good, man. And so I think he's kind of your guard. He would probably, I think, be a starter this year if it wasn't that Andre Otto's just a redshirt junior and he's just a true sophomore. So I think he's more like we'll groom him for next year, pending everybody's still here. And then Chavez, Sandman Thompson is probably your definitely backup center. I would go ahead and I'm surprised he could actually contend for the starting job, but he's just a redshirt freshman. They did play him a little bit last year. But the last thing I will say on the offensive line, they don't rotate a lot under Herb Hand. He typically likes to ride with his 5, but they do feel like they have around 7 to 9 guys they like this year. So I would say for me, this group, the potential of the floor is a little bit lower. I think the ceiling is a little bit lower, but I think the depth is a little bit better.
Good. No, that makes a lot of sense. We're at about our hour mark, Jesse. So I always ask 2 questions to my guests, one of which I think we know the answer to because we already talked about this. In the ACC, which coach is on the hottest seat? We've already talked about this.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that.
After Norvell, who would it be? So this is how I ranked the list when I did it a couple weeks ago, ACC-wise, just because I think at North Carolina there's some buyer's remorse with Bill.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I would, the only maybe rearrangement I would have of that would be, and I think you could keep it fairly like it is, would maybe be Bill O'Brien at number 2, because that experiment has went south fast. But I think you also get back to, and this is no dish at BC fans, but I think it's a more of a standards question, right? Like Bill O'Brien might be longer into his tenure of being worse than Bill Belichick, but I think North Carolina will tolerate being bad a lot less than Boston College will. So I think they would move on first.
And O'Brien did go to a bowl game in year 1. They were just so bad last year.
Yeah. So if you see, it depends on how they do this year. And I know they've taken a step back at quarterback and stuff like that. So I think the pressure is there, even at a place like Boston College.
I think it's pretty tough too. I was looking. So non-conference wise, they open up with 2 P4 teams. They're at Cincinnati and Rutgers to open the season. You could go 0-2 there.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, to me, those 3 you nailed, and whichever order you want to order them in. I mean, Mike Norvell is number 1, but his buyout is also huge. So that kind of maybe you could put him. The seat is hottest, but if you wanted to go like most realistic to get fired, maybe Mike Norvell is number 3 because of his buyout.
Yeah,
but I do think
and if we're going. If we're taking away the term fired and most likely to not be there in 27, but then could be Belichick because he might just decide, no, I don't need to do this. This isn't working. Yeah,
I think that's probably your most likely scenario. But you nailed the top 3 without a doubt. I think those 3 are coaching for their job this year. Stanford's interesting because it's first year. What are the standards there? But you got Andrew Luck and the big investment that they got this offseason. James Franklin would be tough to put that high, only because I would say, like, man, he is. I think they went so all in on him.
You're right. They did. My thing is, if they have a bad stretch, like he ended with at Penn State, or they don't become instantly very competitive, does that wear off quickly?
Yeah,
Now,
I
I
can
don't.
see that.
Now, I think the top three are the only ones that realistically we could be talking about as getting fired this year or
Yeah.
not having their job. But
Even with Virginia Tech, they no offense because I love that program, but they've been bad for so long. They just need something.
Yeah.
Now, I will say one that I think is a couple of these that might be underrated on this list is I would say Dabo at Clemson and Dave Doran at NC State. Those are two that I would maybe keep my eye on because when you talk about NC State, man, they're a perennial 7 to 9 win team. Like they don't really have a lot of losing seasons, but they don't really have special seasons either. And Dave Doran, like he's good enough to get you to a bowl every year, but how long is that good enough for? And then Clemson, it's getting stale, man. It's getting very stale up there. And if they have another bad season, I don't, the Tyler from Spartanburg stuff, and they're arguing with fans and stuff. It almost kind of feels like the end of the Jimbo era at Florida State, where things just started. Some bad hires showed up and arguing with fans, and we saw this play out. And so I just wonder. Now, I think he's coached his way out of, like, I thought he was a shoo-in for the Alabama job before they had a couple of things happen. Obviously, they just signed Caleb.
I don't know that he ever would have taken it. And that's talking to some people that had played with him at Alabama. They said, why would you leave what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think that's a tough situation because, to his point, like Clemson fans have to understand that it's hard to stay at the top. It's not super hard to get there. It's hard to stay there. And so you might want to be careful what you wish for if you get rid of them, but it does feel stale there.
I think it is. And the step before getting fired is firing your coordinators.
Yeah.
They did that with Garrett Riley last year, who's now at Missouri. Same with Alex Atkins is with them at Missouri. So,
and he fired, I think, 2 DCs now? Yes. I think it is. So, it's getting stale.
Yeah. Now they do have, I believe, Tom Allen is still, he's going into year 2 at DC, and he's legit. He's very good at that.
Yeah, for sure.
But
in fairness, I actually had them as playing for a national title last year. I don't know what happened.
I thought they'd make the playoffs for sure.
Yeah,
I had zero
did
doubt
too.
that they would. Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
The second question I always ask is a little bit more of a thinker, and I have kind of 2 answers for it, but it's what coach in the ACC with a good season or 2 is likely to get a better job or, get a blue blood head coaching job. So I'll put the list back up. For me, there's 2 and I'll explain them.
Man.
But
yeah, I think it's kind of tough because you have to define better in a way, right? And I say that because so like Rhett Lashley at SMU feels like he could outgrow SMU, but they've invested some money in that program. Yeah. Mario Cristobal, I think he's at his mountain. He's never leaving there. Fran Brown, obviously, I think if he'd had another good year like he did in the first one, probably is not even at Syracuse now.
So Fran Brown's one of my 2, because you had the coming, was at Georgia with Kirby, and I think a good, he probably needs to have, I don't think it happens after this year because of how bad they were last year. Fran might have to have 2 good years, but they were also artificially bad last year.
Yeah.
If Steve Angeli would have stayed healthy, they would have won 8 or 9 games again. It was just, they were so bad. And in the portal NIL era, Fran Brown takes that blame. It's on him that you didn't have a good backup QB.
Yeah.
But still.
Because they were humming before Angeli got hurt. I mean, they just beat Clemson, and then he's back this year, so we'll see. Yeah. I mean, if that makes a difference, then that could be one. And I know it's going to be cheating because we talked about this a little bit before we recorded, but I agree with you on the second one would probably be Jake Dickert at Wake Forest.
Brown and Dickert are my 2. And for Dickert specifically, I think going back to his home state, if Luke Fickell gets fired, he is a Wisconsin candidate. I believe.
And I think you also have to look at it from kind of like what I said at the opening is you have to look at the program itself that they're at, and does it get what constitutes bigger? Well, it's not hard to get bigger than the smallest school in Power 4.
Exactly.
So Wake Forest, for all the credit that they have, they've hired a couple of really good coaches in a row.
Yeah,
it's just the resources
very good.
Exactly. Doing more with less.
What was good. Yeah.
Right. But it's one of those where it's just the resources. They can invest as much as they want, but there's only so much to invest at a small school like that. And it's a nice school. I've been to Wake Forest before, but that's when I think if it ends up being good, it's just going to be a resource problem for Wake Forest. They're just not going to be able to hold on to him.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. The other guy who I think it could happen to, but it would take a pretty good job, would be Manny Diaz.
Yeah.
Like it. So in my SEC list, I had Jeff Lebby as the second hottest seat. Manning was the old D coordinator there. If Duke has another decent year and Lebby's gone at Mississippi State, Manny could be a guy for Mississippi State. And if you're him, I think you probably take an SEC job.
Yeah, and I mean, let me throw this out, not out of the realm of possibility too. Yeah, Manny Diaz is a Florida State guy.
Yes.
So, I mean, it could very well happen. Yeah, I do
forgot
think
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, like the interesting thing for me with Duke is like they are investing in football now. I mean, they paid $4 million for Mensa. We're not paying $1 million for a quarterback. So, you know, I don't know where does Duke stack in the resources, but I think Manny's another guy that a couple more good years. You know, Elko was there for a cup of coffee and on to Texas A&M when when he had a couple good years. I think Manny could see the same thing.
Yeah, I also for him, if Matt Campbell doesn't work out at Penn State, would Manny go back there? I think that would be on the table as well.
Oh, yeah. I think the other thing you have to consider, too, with any coach carousel talk is the conference that the team that's calling them is in, right? Because right now, I don't care, like, if you know, say you love Duke and all that stuff, and it's a great place to be, but if you're talking about a Big Ten team, you'd be crazy not to take that, just with the direction college football's going.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because a specific job I brought up, and Manny Diaz and James Franklin were the two guys I mentioned. Maryland. Franklin was a Maryland guy. Do you leave Virginia Tech for Maryland? They've had 2 good seasons in 15 years.
Yeah.
They were back to back with Loxley. I think Loxley's another guy who's went stale. I don't know that they're going to be great. They might be looking next year. But if you're Manny or Franklin, you at least have to consider, while they're in the Big Ten, maybe I need to look at this.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you'll have to look at facilities and resources and commitments, and you'll start to see things like they did with Lane Kiffin. You know, we're going to guarantee you this much NIL money. And I mean, honestly, at this point in the game that we love, that as much as the sport has changed, that changes your decision, I think, a lot too. I mean, if someone's going to guarantee you, $30-40 million in NIL money every year, who are you not to take it? Because that is as important as anything else. That is more important than any facilities or anything that you can build right now, is just being able to go get and buy players. And it's gonna steal some coaches. Yeah, exactly. And that's really kind of where we worry about with Florida State. Like, we do okay now, but what about 5-10 years from now, if you're still in the ACC and you're $40-50 million behind? Like, does Florida just come say, hey, I like your DC, I'll pay him double what he's making there, come over here?
And it might be a reason why you have a good, I'll use Northwestern as the example. They're a middle to bottom middle Big Ten team. Dave Braun's a heck of a coach. He went in there right away and won games. They struggled. Then last year they were back being pretty good in year 3. But if I'm Dave Braun, with the new stadium, they hired Chip Kelly for it. They hired Jerry Neuhazel. You brought in a good portal QB. It takes a lot for you to leave for a non-Big Ten or SEC job at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of what they're promising you.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at recruiting perception. Like, you get the natural bump for like a place like Florida State or Miami, who's in the South, or Clemson. Yeah. But I mean, when you look at the NFL draft and how many kids were just drafted out of the Big Ten and the SEC versus the ACC, you look at the way, the way ESPN and Fox and they sell their big brand, and the way the ACC kind of gets undercut. Like, kids just want to play in those two conferences right now because they're the premier conferences, and so that has to be considered in everything now.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right about that. But we've reached our ending time here, Jesse, but I just want to say thank you for being here. And again, fans, you can see his handle, Plant the Spear, at the bottom, and then where you can add him. But it was great to talk Seminole football. And again, thank you for being here. Have a great day.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to it. Hopefully this is a little better year than we've had the last 2, but we'll see, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I hope so as well. Thank you.